Just wanted to say a little bit about innovations. This is one of the more demanding parts. In a way, once you know what you're doing, the first phase is relatively straightforward. The skillful bit is the innovation stage. So with little ones, it's easy enough. Once upon a time was a little old lady who baked a gingerbread man, can quite nicely become once upon a time there was a little old man who baked a, oh, what have I got in my story bag? Come on, Jimmy, you've been really good. Come and have a look. Oh, you've chosen out the bunny rabbit. Once upon a time, there's a little old man who baked a gingerbread bunny rabbit. What's a funny thing, isn't it? And on we go. So we're making some simple changes, and we call those simple substitutions. Fairly quickly, we can start adding. We can start adding in adjectives, for instance. We need to work on that in reception. Adding in adjectives, we can start adding in similes using like or using as. We can even start by the end of reception into year one, start adding in some adverbs. So we're developing the sentences as we go along. Then we can start adding in extra sentences. Indeed, we can start adding in extra paragraphs. Indeed, we can start embellishing the whole thing. This is why I said earlier on another video, it's important when you're, particularly as they get older, it's important that, in a sense, the models can become trimmer and trimmer. So they get a basic pattern, but there's plenty of space for embellishing, for fluffing it out, for building in suspense, building in action, extra scenes happening. So you've got to pitch it at the right level for the children. One of the reasons why talk for writing is sometimes criticised is that teachers often tend to hug too closely to the original model. And we have developed this idea, for instance, in Watermore in Cirencester. They developed the simple idea with this text, who needs to hug closely? In other words, you stick closely to the basic model because you lack confidence, you need that basic model as a scaffold to help you. And who can shake hands with it and say, thank you very much, model, I've got the basic idea of writing a report and I'm off to do my own now, and I'm going to add in extra bits about that animal. So it's not just what is it, what does it look like, where do you find them, life cycle, but I'm also going to add in do they make good pets, should they be hunted. So I'm going to add my own paragraphs in because I know what I'm doing and I'm feeling very confident. So you have to pitch it at the right level, always pitching it slightly above or more than slightly above where the children are. The shared writing is about progress. You are modelling progress, the sort of thing that you want them to achieve. If for the whole year you model greater depth, in the end, many children will achieve greater depth because they're constantly, cognitively, linguistically being exposed to greater depth reading and writing. Alteration is the third one. Alteration is where you make a change to a text. Take a story, you alter it, make a change to it, and that then has consequences. And there are lots of lovely picture books that do this. I'm thinking of the ones where Snow White in New York, for instance, where it completely altered. The setting is altered in that instance. We can also do change of viewpoint. And that's an interesting one, quite a challenging one, where you rewrite the text from a different viewpoint. It's the old thing of getting the wolf to rewrite Little Red Riding Hood from their viewpoint, from his viewpoint, as to, you know, it wasn't my fault. I mean, I just went round and knocked on the door, next thing I knew. So, you know, I just went in for a cup of sugar. That sort of writing. So change of viewpoint, change of time, change of person, taking a past tense he, she story and putting it into the present tense. And what's the effect of that? Experimenting on that to try and find our voice as young writers. We can change the text type. This is becoming more sophisticated, but in year two we can do Little Red Riding Hood and we can very nicely move into being journalists and doing it as a newspaper entry. So we've got the content, but we're altering a text type. It's interesting with older ones to take a story and get them to redo it as, you know, as a thriller, as a sci-fi, as a domestic story. As a historical story, adding in historical details. So altering the text type. One of my favourite ones with older ones is getting them to rewrite it in the style of a favourite author. But of course, in order to do that, you've got to be a big reader and you have to have a favourite author that you've read lots and lots of. So you have the imaginative world of Jacqueline Wilson there. You have the way in which she writes. You have her written style. You know her voice, and that is helping you shape your own voice. We've also experimented with rewriting text in the style of the class novel, in the world of the class novel. And that can be really an exciting one to do. We can practice that by taking paragraphs and innovating on the back of those paragraphs. So we learn how to write in the style of, we try and purposefully imitate and capture the voice of the class novel. and they reset a text in that way. And then of course you've got the whole business of manipulating the order. So certainly by year 5 and 6 we should be working on, well, where are we going to start? So if we're looking at the boxing up, we might well say, well, let's start at the end and do a flashback to the beginning. So we start to manipulate the order of the text. One of the dangers, by the way, of the boxing up, let's say I'm looking over there at on the washing line of the boxing up, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, the weaker writers are going to use that. Probably they're going to do 6 paragraphs, but the stronger writers could be constrained by that. Let's say you've got a story and the basic story is 6 paragraphs long. The opening paragraph is a warning. So your weaker writers, it's a strong scaffold. I want 1 paragraph in which a couple of characters are warned not to do something. But your stronger writer, that might actually take 2 pages. They're going to go for it. So what we could say about the boxing up in terms of innovation is it's a paragraph planner for weaker writers who need that basic structure and to hug to it. But it is a structure that can be embellished, added to, altered and manipulated. It's a plot idea. It's a structure that can be used by more confident writers. And sometimes when you see confident writers moving right away from that basic model, they're still doing a warning story, but you'd barely recognise the original. And that's where we need to get to in terms of independence in writing. And then blending types together. So the more confident type writer will manipulate the text, but they may well come to you and say, well, what I'm doing is I'm going to have a journey story, but it's through a magical portal, and right at the beginning there's a warning. So we start blending those story types together. So those are some different types of innovation, and as teachers we need to be thinking, where are the children? Is this a scaffold? And how do we move forward? So increasingly the writing becomes more and more independent, with them knowing their tools, successfully using their tools, using those structures, but manipulating them. And that's something that needs careful thinking about. Remember, it's the shared writing that sets the pace. So if you want them to move away from the model, you have to move away from the model in the shared writing.